All right, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about a life so packed with duels, drama, and pure defiance that if you read it in a novel, you'd say, no way, that's just too over the top. But believe me, the story of Julie d'Aubigné is very, very real. So let's kick things off with a question that really gets to the heart of her unbelievable story. Could a convicted arsonist also become the biggest star at the Paris Opera? Well, for Julie d'Aubigny, the answer was a loud, clear yes. Okay, let's dive right in. Her name was Julie d'Aubigny, but to everyone else, on the stage and in the streets, she was simply known as La Maupin. And she was a diva, a duelist, and a complete and utter disruptor of her time. Now, to really get a feel for her story, you gotta picture the world she was born into. We're talking 17th century France, under King Louis XIV, a world built on absolute order, rigid etiquette, and strict obedience. And right into the middle of all that walked Julie d'Aubigny, who was pretty much the human embodiment of chaos, defiance, and a wild pursuit of freedom. So where does a person like this even come from? Well, her story doesn't start in some fancy ballroom. Nope. It begins in a place no 17th century woman was ever supposed to be, the royal stables at Versailles. Her education was, well, it was completely unheard of for a girl back then. Her father was a high-ranking court official, and he had her trained right alongside the king's male pages. So, yeah, as you can see, she learned all the academic stuff, but she also mastered fencing. And get this, she wasn't just good. The stories say she was better than all the boys. You know, all this unique training led her to start wearing men's clothing. And this wasn't just some disguise for fun. I mean, think about it. If you're a master fencer, you can't be tripping over restrictive skirts. Dressing like a man was a practical necessity that just became a core part of who she was. It gave her a freedom of movement and a kind of social power that other women could only dream of. Her life took a more conventional turn, at least for a minute, when she was 14. She became the mistress of her father's very powerful boss, the Count d'Armagnac. To keep things looking respectable, he set up a marriage for her to a clerk named Maupin, which gave her a title, and then he immediately sent the new husband away to a job in the provinces. So technically, she was married, but she was also completely independent. But, you know, that kind of independence just wasn't enough for her. The life of a kept mistress got boring fast. And so she kicked off what would become the most infamous chapter of her life, becoming a fugitive from the law. She fell for a fencing master, and when he had to skip town after an illegal duel, she went right with him. They scraped by on the road, putting on fencing shows and singing in taverns for money. And that's actually how she discovered her talent for performing, which eventually got her a spot at the Marseille Opera. But, of course, that's also where her next huge scandal kicked off, an affair with a local merchant's daughter. So when her lover's parents found out, they did what you did back then. They locked their daughter away in a convent. D'Aubigny's solution to this was just audacious. She actually joined the convent as a novice. Then, when an elderly nun died, she stole the body, put it in her lover's bed, set the room on fire, and escaped with the young woman during all the chaos. I mean, seriously. And here's where the legal stuff gets truly bizarre. The court charged her, in her absence, with kidnapping, body snatching, and arson. But the 17th century legal system had absolutely no category for a woman abducting another woman from a convent. So, what did they do? They tried and convicted a man, Sieur de Maupin, and sentenced him to death by fire. The authorities were literally hunting for a man who didn't even exist. Okay, so you have a death sentence hanging over a male version of yourself. You'd think she'd lay low, right? Nope. Instead, she headed straight for the biggest, most famous stage in all of France, the Paris Opera. And this is where her incredible comeback story really begins. So how do you beat a death sentence? Easy. You just get your powerful ex-lover to go ask the king for a favor. The Count d'Armagnac went to Louis XIV, who was apparently so entertained by the sheer boldness of her story that he granted her a full royal pardon. Just like that, poof, her entire criminal record was wiped clean. Now, her scandalous reputation was matched only by her incredible talent. She had this vocal range called a bas-dessus. You can think of it like a modern mezzo-soprano or contralto. At the time, this deep, powerful female voice was almost never heard in a leading role. Opera was all about the high sopranos. And this slide really shows just how much of a game changer she was. In 1702, the composer André Campra wrote the lead role of a warrior princess in his opera Tancred, specifically for her unique deep voice and her famous sword skills. This was the first time a bas-dessus had ever been given a major lead role in French opera. She didn't just star in operas, she literally changed how they were written. But her opera career? That's really only half the story. Her antics off the stage were just as famous, and they are what really cemented her status as a living legend. The stories are just endless. She once publicly caned a famous tenor because he was harassing the other women. During a little stint in Brussels, she stabbed herself on stage with a real dagger, just for dramatic effect. When a noble tried to pay her to leave town, she threw a bag of money at his messenger's feet. Her whole life was just pure theater, both on and off the stage. But no story is more famous than the one about the triple duel. The legend goes that she showed up to a royal ball dressed as a man, openly flirted with a beautiful young woman, and then just kissed her. And this, as you can imagine, enraged 3 different noblemen who all challenged her to a duel right there on the spot. So what happened next? She went outside, and she fought all 3 of them, one after another. 3 noblemen challenged her. 3 noblemen were defeated, all in a single night. She then supposedly walked right back into the ball and told everyone what she'd just done. Now, dueling was super illegal and was punishable by death. But when the king heard about it, he was, once again, just amused by her nerve. He reportedly declared that since his anti-dueling laws were written for men, they just didn't apply to a woman. So, another huge scandal and another royal loophole. But this chaotic, wild life had a surprisingly poignant and romantic end. Her final great love was with a high-ranking noblewoman, the Marquise de Florensac, and they lived together for 2 years in what was, for d'Aubigny, a really unusual period of peace and stability. But when the Marquise died suddenly in 1705, a completely heartbroken d'Aubigny walked away from her career forever. After the death of her love, she was just inconsolable. She left the Paris Opera at the absolute height of her fame, disappeared from public life, and reportedly entered a convent. Yep, the very same kind of place she had once set on fire. Just 2 years later, she died in obscurity at the young age of 33. Her legacy has evolved so dramatically over time. Back in the 19th century, she was sort of turned into this romantic, fictionalized character in a novel. But today, she's been reclaimed as this incredibly powerful historical figure, an icon of LGBTQ+ history and a potent symbol of someone who lived completely, unapologetically, defying every single gender and social rule of her time. Which brings us to our final question. Was Julie d'Aubigny just a one-of-a-kind historical anomaly, a product of her very unique time and place? Or is her story something more, a timeless symbol of what it truly means to live a life of absolute, uncompromising rebellion? Maybe the most incredible part of her story is that centuries later, we're still asking,